What's up? What's happening? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Mr. Station, which is for anything and everything mission, including a sponge that lives in a pineapple under the sea, as well as TV and movies on your host, Justin Small. What about SpongeBob must have a rock bottom? Welcome to the first of today's 2-episode reviews, and I'm just going to say right now, both these episodes are bad. One's obviously far worse than the other, but they're both still bad, so this is going to be a pretty dour, negative review. So just buckle up. It's a double dose of garbage. First up is Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful, and it's another Squidward torture porn. Wonderful. So in this episode, Squidward starts out in a decent mood, and then he ends up stepping in gum. And then when he finally frees himself of the gum after some meaningless gags, he's then approached by this cop, and this cop finds him thinking that he's the one that littered, even though it was already there when he picked it up, because as you're going to learn very soon, Bikini Bottom has a very strict rule when it comes to littering, and he is sentenced to community service of picking up trash, where he's mocked by Squilliam, beaten up multiple times, and even has to end up relying on SpongeBob to help him get rid of all the garbage. And it just keeps getting worse and worse because the cop keeps giving him more and more tickets and more community service, even though things that happen are not his fault. Yeah, it's one of those episodes where you just want to yell. It's one of those episodes that just leaves you feeling bad and frustrated for Squidward because he literally did nothing. Like, he got himself free from gum. That's it. He got himself free from a piece of gum. And yet that apparently is enough to keep punishing him throughout the entire episode. Now, that doesn't mean the entire episode is garbage, though, because, like I said, this isn't like a 0 or anything like that. It's not like the worst episode of the show material, but it is still bad. Okay, what are the good parts? Well, it's not a highlight, but Squidward does get to win in the end, which, that's refreshing, and I think the only other one that he actually gets to win in the end out of these Squidward torture porns is House Fancy, which we already talked about. And as for the actual highlights of the episode, I have 2. And it's mainly because there were no highlights of the second episode I had to talk about today by any means necessary. So I kind of had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to find something at least notable. So highlight number 1 is this weird, happy little dance that Squidward does as he's walking down the road. Like, it barely lasts like 5 seconds, then he steps in gum and everything goes back to how it is, you know, Squidward being miserable, etc., etc. But it's one of those moments where you're just like, oh cool, Squidward's happy, and oh no. It's like that little moment of thinking that this episode could actually be decent and not torture Squidward, but no, because modern SpongeBob hates Squidward, that's just what they do. So, momentary little bit of misdirection. And then for the actual highlight of the episode, the one part of this episode I actually found funny is when Squidward ends up stealing a wagon from a kid to help take care of all the garbage. And the elders of the houses on the street that he's walking down all end up coming out and putting a ton of garbage on the wagon. And then he starts pulling the wagon, and then the kid shows back up again and says, "Hey Mom, that's the one that stole my wagon." The mom comes out, which is just this big, giant, buff gorilla, pretty much, and gives Squidward karma for stealing her son's wagon. That's the one time in this episode that Squidward actually gets beat up that he deserves it. Outside of that, though, this episode sucks. Like, it's just another Squidward torture porn following the same beats as usual, and that freaking cop got more and more annoying with every single freaking ticket that he gave to Squidward. And if it weren't for the fact that he actually wins in the end, this would probably be lower. It's a bad episode, plain and simple. Final verdict, 2 out of 10. It's bad. It's not the worst thing ever, but it's bad. But hey, it's Mozart compared to what we have to look at next, which is, probably the absolute worst episode of the entire show, and one of the worst episodes that I've ever watched in animation. Yes, it really is that bad. How bad? Well, let's suffer through the infamous garbage fire that is a pal for Gary. So, you want to know how bad this episode is? Well, let me preference it like this. It is the episode, well, one of two episodes in particular, that made people completely turn away from SpongeBob for a good while. Because it was so bad, so poorly written, so half-assed, and so frustrating that it literally breaks people's minds. I know it may seem like I'm being overdramatic, but no, I'm not. This is one of the absolute, if not the absolute, worst episode in the entire series, and for damn good reason. So, what's the plot? SpongeBob gets a new pet, Gary doesn't like it, and then this new pet keeps doing these things that scare Gary, but SpongeBob keeps blaming Gary for it, even though he's doing nothing wrong. Then this new pet ends up literally ripping the entire house apart while trying to chase Gary and turning into this giant monster thing with multiple tongues and all kinds of nasty crap. And SpongeBob ends up coming out after, like, around the morning time when all this chaos is pretty much finished and the house is a wreck. And even though he sees that Gary is in the mouth of this monster, about to be eaten alive, he still blames Gary for the mess. What the hell were these writers smoking to think that that actually was a good thing to put in the episode? This is SpongeBob at his dumbest, most frustrating, and absolute worst, because throughout the entire episode, throughout the literal entire 11-minute episode, he tortures Gary. He keeps acting oblivious. He keeps refusing to blame Puffy Fluffy for anything. Not to mention the fact that he outright stole Puffy Fluffy from this cryptic-looking seller. And then he keeps blaming Gary for it. Like, does SpongeBob do anything likable in this episode? No, because as we see when SpongeBob goes to work, Gary does fine. He puts on an old Western, he puts a Western on the TV, he gets a drink, and he just has himself a good time. So, yeah, in other words, it makes SpongeBob look like an ass for pretty much the entire episode. And then he looks even more like an ass when he starts blaming Gary for everything that Puffy Fluffy, stupid ass name, is doing to the house and to things in the house. Like, there's literally a scene in this fucking episode where SpongeBob is trying to eat enchiladas, and Puffy Fluffy ends up ripping up this carrot toy thing that Gary tried to offer to this pet. And even with rubber pieces ending up in his food, SpongeBob still blames Gary. I don't even know what else to say. Oh, and then the episode ends with him still blaming Gary, despite the fact that he saved SpongeBob from getting eaten alive, and makes him go to work with him. Allow me just this one word uncensored, okay? Fuck you! There's a reason why this is an episode that has become so infamous that literally everyone under the sun is ripped it to shreds. Because it is one of the worst written, most tedious, frustrating, dull, boring, monotonous, agitating, aggravating, horribly written, unwatchable piles of absolute dumpster fire trash I have ever seen in my life. Like, heck, I literally ended up watching reviews before the actual episode. So even knowing what I was getting into going in, I still wasn't ready for how absolutely atrocious this thing is in every single capacity. Rot in rock bottom, you piece of shit. Final verdict for this episode is a 0.5 out of 10. Why is it not a 0? Because the way SpongeBob says enchiladas is a little funny. But that's it. Outside of that, this is one of the absolute worst episodes in all of SpongeBob, and may it forever rot in the deepest, darkest pits of hell. And that's one terrible episode that I never have to talk about again. Yay! Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry for getting super angry in this review, but these episodes need to be nailed to the ground. And thankfully, now that I've done that, we can move on to, another trash bag. Oh boy. I'll see you guys next time for my least favorite episode in all of SpongeBob, Yours, Mine, and Mine, and the surprisingly decent Cracked Crabs. Until then, thanks for watching, stay spongy, screw this episode, and I'll see you in the next review. Peace.
Lesson I will soon forget, so listen and you won't regret. Be true to yourself, don't miss your chance, and you won't end up like the fool who ripped his pants.